Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the chart of Vanity, whose real name was Denise Matthews, and I said was because she passed away several years ago, and she was a protege, I think you could call her that, of Prince. And Prince wrote some songs for her in the early 80s that she performed with two other women in a group called Vanity 6. And then she went on to a solo career and she made at least one movie. And then she renounced it all, or denounced it, maybe both, and became a preacher. And I would say a Christian fundamentalist preacher to boot. So that is quite an extreme change from a very sexualized image. And that's what Vanity 6 was all about. And if you go on YouTube, you can find examples of that. And if you're under the age of probably 45, you may not have ever heard of her. I'm sure you've heard of Prince, but maybe not of her, because truth be told, when I was looking at how her singles did, I don't think she ever had a hit in the United States. She had one that bubbled just under the top 100. That isn't something to get airplay, though. And I don't recall ever hearing her songs on the radio. I was in high school when she came out, or, also like probably going to college and stuff like that briefly. At that time, in like close to the, around 83, 84-ish. And she was supposed to be in Purple Rain. And there was some kind of a dispute, and she backed down. And then Apollonia ended up doing that role. But I guess the role was her. So if you've seen Purple Rain, the female, a love interest was supposed to be Vanity. So anyway, I don't even know why I started, getting obsessed with watching her videos and all that stuff. It just happened like last week. I get these little obsessions, and then I start just reading about the person, watching the videos and stuff like that. And then I decided to look up her astrology and see what was happening with it. Because she was a very beautiful woman. There's no question about that. She was a very beautiful woman. And like Prince, she was biracial. Her father was a Black American man from the South, and her mother was of Polish descent and some other European descent. I think maybe like German, something like that. But Vanity was actually born in Canada, of all places, which I did not know until I looked that up. Niagara Falls, to be exact. And she was actually Jewish. I mean, I don't know. See, the thing is, like, if your mother is Jewish, you're Jewish. That's just how it works. And I don't know if her mother was even a religious Jew. She might not have even been a practicing Jew. So it was just something in her family lineage on her mother's side. But I had never heard that either. And I think it's interesting that she became a Christian fundamentalist preacher. And the reason I keep saying fundamentalist is because, I was raised a Christian myself, but I was raised a liberal Christian. Fundamentalist Christians are very, hardcore about heaven and hell and all that stuff. And as a matter of fact, she was abused by her father. And I don't know if it was the 700 Club interview. I was watching multiple interviews, and in one of them, she was talking about her father, and she said, "Oh yeah, it was really bad, blah blah blah." And then she said, "But he's in hell now," and she was saying it almost like very sadly. But there was something about how she said that. She didn't say it like she was angry. It was almost like she pitied him. But I I felt like that was a really kind of a strong statement to make. And of course, that would be because of my own belief system where I don't believe in eternal hell at all. I think that that's absurd, and of course, that's just my opinion, but it doesn't jibe with what I see as God. I don't think God tortures people eternally, even if they do horrific things. I just don't believe that. I think that that is what man would love to fantasize about if they have somebody in their life who has brutalized them. Now, when I went on Wikipedia, they mentioned that her father beat her and verbally abused her. I personally think that she was sexually abused. Now, by whom? That's we can just ponder that one for a minute, because I'm not going to obviously make any accusations. But the reason I say that is that she seemed very uncomfortable with the overt sexuality that she was portraying. And one example of that was, I can't remember the name of the song, her famous song, Oh Nasty Girl. If you see that video, the two accompanying backup singers and, performers, they have on like kind of like a leotard type of thing, and maybe, thigh-high stockings. I don't remember. But I noticed in more than one performance that I saw her, she wore like a long type of a coat that covered her. Like she showed, she had the coat open. You can see that she's wearing that lingerie, but she's not showing her backside. There were, I have seen things where she ended up like taking that coat or whatever off. But in a lot of them, she keeps that on. And that to me is somebody who is like covering up, who is feeling somehow very exposed. That is not consistent with the image that she is portraying. So she is showing her ambivalence about it. And to me, I felt like that was an example of that was kind of almost like proof that she had experienced being sexually abused, but she was also capitalizing on it. And a lot of women who go into porn have had a background of sexual abuse, maybe like 95% in prostitution. Very, very high percentage. I don't know if I'm correct about that, but I think it's like super high. And so it's no wonder, because people don't tend to, gravitate towards those types of behaviors. It's not that it's like an evil thing. It just is not, it's kind of an extreme thing. And so that's my feeling based upon that and other things that she said when people were touching upon her past or her attitude towards, what she was doing in interviews. She just seemed like she really wasn't, she didn't like it. And of course, when she renounced everything, obviously, that was showing that she thought that it was wrong what she had done. So that me saying that, is no, I really do not want to, disrespect her in any way. And of course, I could be 100% wrong about what I'm saying. But I do feel that it's important to acknowledge this, because one of the things that I noticed that like almost turned my stomach was how often these interviewers, and it ran the gamut, tended to make sexual, like double entendres, and just like treat her like she was some kind of a, like almost like a prostitute, or, that she wasn't, just not treating her like they would any other woman. And sometimes I saw that she did a double take, like almost like hurt. But I'm going to tell you why I think that she allowed herself to be degraded like this, because there was one of these songs, and I'm just going to tell you the title. I'm not going to tell you the lyrics, but it's called Pretty Mess. And this was after I think she departed from Prince. I don't know who wrote that song, and I don't know. They must have been on a lot of drugs if they thought that that song was ever going to become a hit, at least in the United States. I know that one of her songs was a hit in like Belgium or something like that. But I wouldn't call that a successful musical career because you had a hit in Belgium. I'm sure Belgium is a pretty small country, and David Hasselhoff is a rock star in some countries. So, enough said about that. But the other thing too is, I not too long ago I read an autobiography by Leif Garrett, and I am of the age in the late 70s where I was in my early teens, and he was one of the sex symbols. He's a little bit older than I am, and yet I never saw him in anything. I can't remember anything I saw him in. And when I was reading his autobiography, I realized how much it was faked. There was so much fakery going on with his so-called success. And it just kind of, it blew my mind, but it was kind of depressing because this world is a world of illusion. I mean, and you can just say so in terms of looking at it from a spiritual perspective. The yogis have a term Maya, which means worldly illusion. So this is nothing new. This has always been the case. But boy, it just, you have to wonder sometimes, like, what is truly real in this world. And so I feel like she is another example of that. And I've had this hollow feeling when I was watching some of her performances, because I just felt like it was so, it wasn't very good. It wasn't uplifting. It was decadent. I know I sound very moralistic, but I'm just telling you that I was sensing her emptiness, because she talks about feeling terrible during that time. But anyway, let me explain why I think all of this happened. First of all, her sun is in Capricorn, her moon is in Scorpio, and she has Taurus rising. She also has Mercury in Sagittarius. And that's the only thing that she has in her inner points that is masculine energy. The rest is feminine energy. Venus is in Capricorn and Mars is in Taurus rising. She has a lot of earth, and earth is always going to gravitate towards things that are tangible and be very astute about finding ways to capitalize on whatever it is that they're doing, to, trying to make a buck. But also, because her sun is in Capricorn, the ruler of the 10th house of career, it makes somebody like that very ambitious and motivated and wanting to better themselves. In her 10th house, when I look at her 10th house, she has Chiron, the wounded healer. The 10th house can also be the father or the parent who's the authority figure. Obviously, given the treatment of her by her father, he would be in the 10th house, and Chiron, this was her greatest wound. So suffice it to say, her relationships with men did not end well, because probably she had not healed from her very abusive relationship with her father. And I guess Prince, I was, listening to other things, and they were saying that Prince was with other women. And, of course, it was sad when Prince died. I don't believe he died the way that they said he did from an overdose. I just don't believe that that he did that, because he kicked out people that were in his band or somebody in his band for using drugs. I just don't, I think people who are anti, drugs, I don't believe they start using drugs at some point. I mean, yes, there is a slight possibility if he did have an injury, but I don't know. I just think that it's very suspicious how he died. But, I respect him as an artist, but I feel like this woman was very vulnerable and that she was exploited. And, obviously she was an adult, so she wasn't a minor when this began. She was born in 1959. So, if you think about 1982 that she did Nasty Girl, she was in her 20s. She was in her early 20s. That's old enough to have judgment. But when you've been brutalized, you're not necessarily emotionally mature, because you're in a survival mode, and sometimes people, it's almost like freezing. Their emotional age almost freezes to whatever the age is when the abuse began, because they're like kind of just trying to keep it together, and they're not really thriving. That's one of the worst parts about abuse, besides the actual terrible treatment, is that it contracts a person. It doesn't expand them. When you're with somebody who supports your dreams and who encourages you, you are going to grow. You're going to expand. You're going to expand your horizons, and you're going to feel like you can do it. When you're abused, your world becomes very small. And so if I were to try to figure out, like, where in the chart does it show that she was abused, I would say that one of the things we look for is Mars. How is Mars being aspected? She had an opposition from the moon to Mars. And that can actually relate to her own, if she had anger management issues at times. But it's almost like when you have oppositions, you're kind of almost blaming others for your reactions, or maybe even your choices, what you choose to do. It's almost like a projection. So, her moon was in Scorpio, and that is a very difficult moon position. When I see somebody who has a prominent Scorpio, I oftentimes say to myself, or, planets in the 8th house, and she has Mercury and Saturn in conjunction, I say to myself, and the 12th house, she has Mars there, that the person probably had a rough childhood. And so Chiron in the 10th can be that authority figures create a painful reality for that person. And what makes it problematic, even when the person grows up, is that then they transfer that negative attitude towards authority, towards the parental figure that was, tyrannical, onto every authority figure. It could be a cop, it can be a boss. And so they're fighting those old battles, and it's like they are perennial adolescents fighting authority. And So that's problematic because that's being very reactive in life. You're not really choosing what you're doing. It's like you are a person who does that. They're first of all, they're reliving the past, and they're not seeing people in the way that they should be seen. They're just kind of projecting the resentment, the anger that they felt towards that parent onto these other people. And I don't think she ever had a long-term relationship. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I didn't see anything about some partner that she had. She even said in an interview, she said, I've been Christ's bride for, I don't know, 12 years. This was at some point in her ministry. So she was suggesting that she had been celibate for a number of years. And in one of the interviews, they said, oh, were you sleeping around? I forgot how they put it. She goes, I was a whoremonger. And I thought that a whoremonger is like a man who takes on prostitutes or something like that. So that was a strange word to use. But in another interview, she said, oh, I wasn't that sexual, or I can't remember what word she used. So there was like two contradictory statements there. And that's another reason why I feel that her sexuality was something that was a loaded issue for her. But definitely the way that these male interviewers regarded her, it didn't seem very respectful. I think Johnny Carson might have been an exception to that in a certain way, because he tended to be a little bit more, classier than some of these other hosts. And she really seemed like she was flirting with him if you look at it. But then again, I'm going to get back to her sun being in Capricorn. Johnny Carson was the, king of the talk shows at that time. So she was appealing to the cream of the crop, the top of the heap. And that was what she wanted. She wanted to have success. But what happens is, it's interesting that in the tarot, in the major arcana, the card that corresponds with Capricorn is the devil. So she was a sun in Capricorn, and in a way you could say she sold her soul to the devil. Obviously that is not literal, but she was willing to do whatever it took to get there. And first of all, she didn't get there in terms of having a well-respected career. She didn't have that kind of status, and that's what the 10th house is about. So that probably caused her pain as well. When you want something so badly and it doesn't materialize, because really what she did was, it could be that she was trying to, take a shortcut and hoping that she could just, rely on her looks to get her to the top. Or just rely on being, this notorious character. And, we have to remember that Prince was on the cusp of superstardom at the time when she started associating with him. He had not done Purple Rain yet. Of course, he was already very popular with Little Red Corvette in 1999, so that was when he was just starting to really make it. And she was riding that wave with him, thinking that it was going to carry her along, and it didn't. And I noticed in one of the songs, it kind of sounded a little bit like a song that he wrote for Sheena Easton, called Strut. And he probably, if he did write that other song, he probably took a piece of that and then, did the more well-rounded melody for Sheena Easton to give her like the cream of the crop. That's the second time I've used that phrase for some reason. So she was really like Vanity, or Denise, was really kind of, to me, disrespected. And I think part of it was that Prince, I think he might have had a little problem seeing women as sexual beings. So he had to make, if a woman was a sexual being, she was a nasty girl. And that, and because Denise or Vanity had that shame inside of her, she was a vibrational match for it, and she owned it. She, was willing to call herself a nasty girl because maybe she felt like one inside if she was sexually abused. So that's why another reason why I'm saying this is that I think that she found herself in that position because her past primed her for being a victim. And this is, when I look at the chart, the 12th house is Pisces house, and it can represent the house of the victim. And I just did a video on Mars in the 12th house. And one of the things when I was compiling my list from a website, they never said anything about, I didn't see anything about addiction. The 12th house can be addiction, and Mars can be our drive, and the driving force in our life. And to me, because the 12th house can represent escapism, this is where where addiction comes in, because it's obviously a way that people try to distract themselves from their pain, or to numb themselves out from pain. So her Mars was in Taurus. Oh yeah, and there was another thing I was thinking too, because Mars can be the sex drive. And in the 12th house, this is the area of hidden things that are hidden, the seclusion, but also like sublimated. So that was the thing that I was kind of like pondering when I was going to do this. And I was thinking to myself, if the sex drive is sublimated, why is that? Well, the 12th house is a house of the spiritual dimensions. It's otherworldly. It can be like a monastery. It can be a nunnery. It's these places of solitude for meditation. And it's also prisons and hospitals, because it can be a place of suffering. But also, I would say, this is a house of karma, so doing penance for things, even if you don't really you haven't done anything wrong, that kind of thing. So Mars here could be somebody who is sublimating their sex drive for a higher reason. So the nun, the monk, I was going to joke and say, well, it's not really a joke. I mean, nuns and monks are human beings, so they may have sex drives too. Just because they've decided to go into this line of work or service to others doesn't mean that they have stopped being a human being. So people like that sublimate this sexual desire, or transmute it like kind of like an alchemist into something higher, into something that can be for the benefit of all, and not just personal lust. Now, I had said something earlier, that I watched an interview with Denise, and she said something about being the bride of Jesus or whatever, from for the last 12 years. And this is something I've heard that phrase from fundamentalist Christian women. And I just feel like it's one thing to be celibate and things like that, but then to have this kind of like, it's kind of like, why are you doing what you're doing? If you're doing it because you were abused and you're looking for a way to heal, yes, I suppose that it's at least a step in the right direction. But sometimes I feel like these are reactions and the person feels like they have to do them in order to rid themselves of shame, in a sense. And the same thing, I feel like even the way that Christianity is set up, where there's God the Father, and it's this loving Father. And if somebody had a father who they perceived as very angry towards them, abusive, even hateful towards them, they're still longing for that fatherly acceptance. And so that can be very appealing to somebody who has a father wound like that. And so, I can see it in two different ways. On the one hand, I feel like, okay, maybe this filled a need in her heart. But in another way, I think it could have left her vulnerable to trying to fill that void or to heal that wound by, falling in line with that particular dogma, even though it might have reinforced some of the shame. If it was a very, some of these religions are very strict about do's and don'ts, and yet, there are all kinds of scandals that occur in these denominations. There were televangelists that had to confess that they had sinned with women and things like that because they're human and their religion didn't allow for that, that possibility. So there can be a safety in a very strict religion because you feel like there are very strong boundaries, that you cannot cross. And that can feel kind of comforting to someone who may have had their boundaries violated or didn't have any boundaries to begin with, but they were treated as if they didn't deserve to have their own ability to agree to something. They were just treated like an object. So I'm kind of, a lot of people, when I was looking at the YouTube comments for her ministry videos, were saying, I'm so glad that she found the Lord before she passed away, and, she's been saved and things like that. And of course, the premise is that you have to save your soul. And if you, give your life to Christ, then in exchange for that, you get eternal life. If you don't, you're screwed. You're going to, whatever, burn in hell eternally. I don't know. If you don't find God, I don't know. I think that would be a little bit much, but like I said, I was raised a liberal Christian, so I didn't get that kind of teaching or message. Now, one thing she said in one of those interviews was something about don't go to fortune tellers and all this stuff. She was telling people that was wrong. And looking at her information, she had Mercury and Saturn in the 8th house. Now, Mercury is the mind, but when it's in a water house like the 8th house, it could be psychic impressions. It could be communication with the dead, even if the person isn't actively doing it. I mean, this might even be somebody who can go into a trance and things like that. So it's possible sometimes I wonder if certain people who speak out against what they think is satanic and that kind of thing are prone to having entities attach themselves to them, and so they feel like they're under attack in one way or the other, and they're kind of thinking that everybody's like that and everybody's under attack. I think that the other thing is, because I was looking throughout her information, and just by virtue of having the moon in Scorpio, that can certainly lead to somebody who is very intuitive. And, Scorpio rules the 8th house. She has a sun in the 8th. I'm sorry, not that. The 8th house is where I just told you about Mercury and Saturn. But in the 9th house, she has the sun and she has Venus. And the 9th house is Sagittarius house. And to me, that's the preacher in her. And actually her Mercury is in Sagittarius. So it's that, that's my sun sign. The sometimes the flip side of that is somebody who's being preachy, So we say when somebody is like kind of always pontificating, that they're kind of, being arrogant about they're moralizing. They're being arrogant about their ethics and kind of like preaching to other people to adopt certain beliefs or behaviors. And that can come across as being preachy. But that shows that it's not a surprise that she went into the ministry with those planets in the 9th house. In the 8th house, like I was saying, she has a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, and that can indicate somebody who maybe had memories that they couldn't shake, or ideas. Maybe, like I was saying, like even some kind of like tendency to tune into these disincarnate spirits, and yet they're creating a certain negative outcome. Mercury in conjunction with Saturn is actually very good for studying because it gives concentration, focus. The person can have a strong ambition for, almost like when a teacher wants to acquire knowledge so that they can do their job. This is like acquiring spiritual information or knowledge. And so in her 7th house, she had Jupiter, and this is the house of committed partnership. Had she lived, and if she had healed, she might have done very well for herself with a partner who was able to kind of open up her world. Now, maybe this was what Prince represented to her, because maybe he, I was going to say maybe he showered her with gifts. He did not. I think one of the main reasons why she did not end up doing Purple Rain was he was only going to give her $5,000 for it. Now, that might just be a rumor, but the point is that if she ever did get married, she would probably marry somebody with a lot of money, and then she could boost her own lifestyle. She did have Venus in Capricorn, and that's another indicator of somebody who is looking for someone that can help them get ahead. And this is their partner. Their partner becomes a stepping stone to bigger and better things. And of course, Prince filled that role to a T. And in her 6th house, she had the moon, Neptune, and the North Node. The North Node was in Libra, and there's a conjunction between the Moon and Neptune in the 6th house. This is like a service to others that has a spiritual bent to it. When somebody has a conjunction between the Moon and Neptune, they are very, it's like having the Moon in Pisces, and they're very empathic and very caring. There's definitely somebody who's tuning into a higher vibration. But what can happen is a person is so accepting in relationships that they may accept things that are not, that are bad behavior, and that make it bad for them, that make it unpleasant for them. So there has to be some awareness of this and being able to see how the person is doing this. The North Node in Libra can be anything with the arts. The North Node is your soul's mission, and Libra is connected, Libra is the ruler of, or Libra is ruled by Venus, and Venus is connected to the arts. So somebody who is tuning in at a high level to, service to others' pursuits, but at the same time, music and other art forms are in the back of your mind. Were in the back of her mind. And she did move on, and she did make, the movie The Last Dragon, but I don't know if she made other things. And who knows, maybe if she had, persisted, she might have further legitimized herself, and I'm just putting legitimized in caps, in quotes, by saying that, because I don't think that she was illegitimate because of the type of entertainment that she provided, but still something that she could have felt proud to have been associated with. And I don't think that she did feel very proud, because somebody said that when she decided, that she actually threw away all of her mementos for all of the things that she did with as Vanity, and who knows how valuable some of that stuff was, because especially it'd probably be a real collector's item, since there doesn't seem to be too much that is existing, currently. So in the 5th house she has Pluto. This can indicate an intense childhood, maybe the sexual abuse kind of coming into play, and the person has to really acknowledge that within themselves. That's the first step, is even admitting it, and then figuring out how to take the tendencies that are associated with displacement and make it something that really is a positive for the self and the community that the person is involved with. Uranus is in the 4th house, and this is the house of home and family, can indicate some kind of instability. Now, it doesn't, to me, if I would see that, I would think that the person was moving around a lot, but, I don't know that she actually did that. So I would just say her father might have been a volatile person, and that was why he would have these kind of bursts of, maybe he had this unpredictable temperament or something like that. And she may feel like kind of repeating that pattern and not laying down roots, and that would be a mistake. So being able to hear a forecast that isn't marred by, unnecessary things and not really dealing with the matter at hand. So I hope that this gave you an overview about this woman who was, whose professional name was Vanity, and what she was coping with and things like that, and how astrology, really can pinpoint some of these things. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.